Life can be hazardous for flying foxes. They get caught in barbed wire fences, entangled in loose netting over fruit trees, and electrocuted on power lines. They can't withstand temperatures much above 40 degrees, and they lose weight rapidly when there's insufficient food. Dedicated wildlife rehabilitators, veterinarians, and vet nurses rescue and treat injured flying foxes with the aim of releasing them back to the wild. They each bring their own individual talents and skills to the task. We join Mandy Griffith, an experienced wildlife rehabilitator, in her extensive facilities where injured flying foxes are being prepared for release.
Hello, my name's Mandy. This is Rubberlegs. He's a grey-headed flying fox. He's an adult male. He lives here in the aviary with all of these other bats who are all rehabilitating flying foxes. Most of them have come in through a veterinary clinic where I work, and they're all ready to go back up for release back out into the wild. This is Diva. She's another long-term care educational animal. She stays here full term, and her purpose is to make the bats feel more at ease when they're in the aviary. And joining her here is her partner in crime. This is Cinders. So these three here are the educational animals for our wildlife care group. We've got a lot of other animals that pass through. Most of them have been injured and they come back for rehabilitation before they go back into the wild. Little babies here. This one came in with a wing injury. We've got this guy here who had problems eating. He had a problem with a constriction in his throat. We've got mums and babies over here. They're all fighting over stuff I've put up there for them. We've got a really old girl in the corner who's lost part of her wing membrane. I've also got some mother bats in here. We've got some little red flying foxes, that funny noise you can hear in the corner, and those little red rusty coloured flying foxes, they're little reds. And we've also got a black flying fox somewhere around here. You can see here the bats there, they're eating the foliage. We tend to feed them a mixture of fruit and foliage. They really like the blossoms. And you can see that they try and pull their leaves off here. They really seem to like the mulberry leaves. One of the most handsome men in this aviary is Silver Ghost, who's just walking forward so you can see how gorgeous he is. Silver Ghost is the gentleman of the aviary. He has a particular penchant for green grapes. He was hand-raised by a carer about 15 years ago. He has some wing membrane damage. He was trapped on a barbed wire fence, and you can see here on his left arm he's losing a lot of wing membrane, and that's why he's unable to be released. But he's a very lovely bat. He's got a wonderful personality and he's much loved, too much loved I think. He's got quite a fan club. And we've got an extremely greedy Cinders. Cinders was called Cinders because her mother was electrocuted on power lines. She was there for 4 days before she was rescued, but eventually she came down, and you can see her wing doesn't sit properly at the end, so she's unable to fly. So she's an educational animal. We've got a very grumpy Rubberlegs up there. He's hogging the cage at the moment, and an extremely obese fowl bat. So they tend to be very territorial about where they feed, and a lot of people tend to think they're fighting, and in a way they're probably just bickering over their dinner rather than fighting, but they're very vocal. And they do like grapes. Oh, you're getting weed on. And they do like to weed on you.
Step backwards.
That's all right. They're very interactive, and they do like clean hair. So if you, yes. If you wash your hair, don't walk into a bat aviary. If you see them facing the right way up, you know that you're going to get another little shower from them. They're very naughty. They're a lot naughtier, and they tend to, they can size you up. If you look over here, there's a geriatric bat here, Cougar, and you can see her little baby just poking its head out from underneath the wing there, looking at all the action that's going on. So that's Cougar's baby. She was called Cougar, but she came in and she quite likes the young boys. So she was impregnated by quite a young flying fox, so she got renamed Cougar. It's probably not a very nice story, is it? In the far corner there, the skinny little bat, that's Sheila. She's very old. She's also a non-flyer, non-releasable, and she stays here as a companion bat. She doesn't go out and do educational talks. She just stays in and keeps the other animals quiet. So we have various companion bats and educational bats performing different purposes. Oh yeah, and just directly above me, this is the black flying fox. He was found on the ground in a car park and he was being attacked by birds, so he had a lot of problems with his eyes. One of his eyes ruptured completely, and we actually took him into work and he had his eyelids sutured together for a while, and now finally he actually is sighted. So a little while longer before all of his fur regrows on his face, and then he'll get released. Most years I creche in this aviary. Because the little bats come in from carers, and they've just been in small areas, in houses and in living rooms, we don't want to put them straight into the flight aviary with these, because as you can see, all of these guys are quite boisterous. They've all got their own little territory, and they've all got their ideas about how the cage should operate. So what we tend to do is we put them into a smaller aviary and we let them gravitate out. And if you look just over here, there's a couple of little bats there. They're only about 7 weeks old. You can see one hanging up there. His name is Thor. He was on power lines, and during a huge electrical storm, a huge clap of thunder knocked him off the power line and he was found on the ground. So he got the name Thor from that, because it's a miracle he survived. So he will probably be one of the first creche occupants, and that will be his little setup there. And eventually, after they're about sort of 13 weeks old, 14 weeks old, they'll all start to come in here and join him. And shortly afterwards, the sliding door there will be opened and they'll form their own little creche group, and they'll migrate out into the aviary. And generally they come out and then they'll go back into that area at night, because it's their own little colony space where they'll hang out. And eventually you'll find that they'll integrate with the adult bats. It takes a little while. Some of them are a little bit more boisterous than the others. And they all come with their own little dummy and their own little jacket and their own little toy and whatever else the carer wants to hand over with them. So they all come with their stuff. Once they've been here for probably about 4 weeks, once they're deemed to be fit mentally and physically, we then move them over to a release facility, and there's an excellent one just north of Sydney up at Gosford that we use. The reason that this place is so wonderful is because they have bats there all year round, and we've had instances in the past where some of these bats have gone off for release, and 6 months after they've been released, they've got injured and they've made their way back to the release cage, and they'll go outside and find some of the bats are in there that have actually thought, okay, I'm sick, I've got to get help, I know where to get help, and they come back. They'll have the treatment here and then we'll repeat the cycle and they'll go back out into the wild. There was a little flying fox about 2 years ago that came back into the aviary, and she's the only bat I've ever had that's been able to open the sliding door. And after a year of being away, she walked back in. I put her into the hospital. She thought, I don't want to be in here. So she opened up the sliding door and marched back into the flight aviary with all of her old friends. It was amazing. So they do remember, they do have definite friendships. A few years ago we had some hypothermic bats that came in. They were very cold. They came from all over Sydney and they were all here in a group. We sent them off for release and we banned them all. Some of these bats you can see here, Silver Ghost has got a metal band on his hand, and that's under the Australian Bird and Bat Banding Society. And that band has a unique number on there. So if he comes back into care, we know it's him, we know who banded him, we know where he was crached, we know he was raised, so we know everything about that bat. And we banded some bats and released them. And during a catch-up project for a research project, 2 bats came in the same mist net, and they had sequential band numbers. And they were bats that had been released 2 years earlier as part of the project here from the rehab, and they've been hanging out together for 2 years. So it shows they communicate, they go to the same sort of areas, and it's not just random bats flying around, they've all got their little friendships, and it's such a fantastic way to learn about these animals. Quite often you'll see barbed wire placed next to really big bottlebrush trees or eucalypts at the side of the road. The bats will fly in looking at what they're about to land on and not see the barbed wire, and they'll get caught in that. And the terrible thing about that is often they'll be hanging there for days. People will just drive past and assume that they've died, and they'll still be alive. We're getting a lot of animals that come in as a result of net caught. Now, net caught bats, generally it's because people want to protect their figs or plums or whatever they've got in their back garden. They'll loosely throw some netting over their trees. Now, the bats fly in at night, they can't see the netting, they become entangled, and it gives horrendous burn-like injuries. Many of these animals can't be saved. Some of them come in with small babies on. Some of them mothers that have left the babies in the colony, and the mother might have to stay in care to be rehabilitated, which means the baby's in the colony and it will die from starvation or be predated on by anything that happens to be hanging out in the colony. So net cord is a really terrible concern for wildlife carers. It's just something that's so easily prevented. By securing the netting across the tree, taut, or making a frame, the animals then will bounce off it rather than getting caught in it. And it's not just flying foxes, it's birds, it's snakes, it's possums, anything that happens to wander past that tree. And it's not really effective because things can get underneath it if they want to. So really we do need to maybe use shade cloth or something like that, which will protect against a lot more bugs and sunburned on the fruit. So a lot of them it's because of human intervention or lack of knowledge, I think, really by the general public is causing these animals to come into care. And we just want people to be aware of how it is to help our wildlife and get less of these in here and more of them out there replenishing the rainforests.
You probably don't know and probably don't care. Just because you don't see them don't mean they're not there. The flying fox, the BAT, the greatest threat that they're facing is ignorance of you and me. You probably don't know and probably don't care. Just because you don't see them don't mean they're not there. The flying fox, the BAT, the greatest threat that they're facing is ignorance of you and me. Truth is, I know some people ain't feeling me, but so many making a difference in the bat industry. Scientists, don't forget the conservations, countless volunteers, government organizations. Follow the news and what the bats do. Pollinization is one of these clues.